You have financial autonomy, and absolutely nobody knows. Not your friends, not your family, not the barista who sees you every single morning at the same neighborhood coffee shop, who thinks you're just another regular ordering the same medium roast. You're not hiding it. You're just ordinary on purpose. While everyone else is out here chasing the thing that looks like success, you quietly became something else. And the strangest part is, the breakthrough didn't arrive with a celebration or a spotlight. It arrived as a boring, automated bank notification while you were standing in the cleaning supplies aisle, comparing two nearly identical bottles of dish soap. You didn't feel anything dramatic. You just looked at the number on the screen, put the cheaper soap in your cart, and kept walking. This is what real mastery looks like. It rarely starts with a plan. It starts with a small, boring observation on a quiet afternoon. Not a revelation, just a moment where you notice a system is broken, and instead of getting annoyed by it, you stop and ask one question. Who actually owns the layer underneath this? Everyone pays rent to someone. Everyone pays a mortgage to someone. You just decided to find out who someone was and how you could become it. It's not a complicated question. It's just one most people never bother asking, because the world is built to keep you focused on the next paycheck instead of the layer underneath it. You weren't smarter than anyone else in that grocery aisle. You were just willing to sit with a boring question for longer than a few seconds. You go home that night and you do the math. It takes you about 45 minutes at your kitchen table with a spreadsheet open. 45 minutes most people will never spend, because most people assume this kind of math isn't for them. What you find isn't glamorous. There's no secret, no shortcut. Just a simple, repeatable formula. Rent collected, minus mortgage, minus taxes, minus maintenance, equals monthly cash flow. On a single small duplex, that number is modest, almost unimpressive. But it's positive. And positive, repeated across enough doors, becomes a paycheck that doesn't need you to show up for it. Your coworker Chad looks at the exact same world and sees something different. Chad sees a lifestyle to upgrade, a nicer car, a bigger apartment, a louder version of the paycheck he already has. You don't feel superior to Chad. He's not wrong for wanting what he wants. You just want something else. You want the architecture underneath the lifestyle, not the lifestyle itself. Right now, the average renter in America hands over more than 30% of their gross income just to keep a roof over their head. Money that flows directly to whoever owns the building. Most people accept this as the cost of living. You looked at it and saw a business model with an opening. So while Chad talks loudly about his new watch in the break room, you quietly automate a rule that requires nobody's permission. You set up a system that sweeps a fixed percentage of every paycheck, enough to feel it, not enough to break you, into a dedicated property fund. It moves before you can spend it, before you can second guess it, before your lifestyle has the chance to expand and swallow it. You let Chad sort you into mid-level, comfortable, not worth the full attention. Good. That small dismissal is a strategy. Looking ordinary is armor. The moment people can see what you're building, they stop relating to and start relating to your status. And status invites opinions, requests, and scrutiny you don't need. So you keep the space clean. You keep driving the same car. You keep buying the same soap. 18 months in, you close on your first property. A 2-bedroom rental 20 minutes outside the city. Nothing special to look at. The tenant's rent covers the mortgage with about $200 left over every month. $200 doesn't change your life, but it proves the model works, and once a model is proven, it can be repeated. The first year of owning it is not glamorous. A water heater fails in February and eats 4 months of that cash flow in a single afternoon. A tenant is late twice. You spend a Saturday you didn't want to spend learning what a security deposit legally covers in your state. None of this makes it into the story people tell about landlords getting rich in their sleep. This is the part nobody puts in the highlight reel. The boring, procedural maintenance of a system that only pays off because you kept maintaining it when it wasn't paying off yet. You repeat it anyway. Property 2 takes less time to find than Property 1 did, because you know what you're looking for now. You know to check the roof's age before you check the paint color, to ask about the neighborhood's vacancy rate before you ask about the school district. Property 3 comes from a referral, because word travels quietly, even when you're trying to stay quiet. A friend of a friend needed to sell fast and didn't want the hassle of a bidding war. Each property, on its own, is unremarkable. A duplex here, a small single-family rental there. None of them would make an interesting story at a dinner party. Together, they are something else entirely. A second income that doesn't ask you how your day was, doesn't care if you're tired, and doesn't require you to be liked, promoted, or noticed in order to keep paying out. You start keeping a simple ledger, not for tax purposes, though it helps with that too, but so you can see the shape of what you're building instead of just feeling it. Rent in, mortgage out, taxes out, repairs out. Net, at the bottom. Some months the net is barely positive. Some months, after a repair, it's negative. But averaged across a year, the trend line only moves in one direction, and that's the only thing that actually matters. Then the test arrives without warning, on an ordinary Thursday. Your corporate division announces a sudden 15% workforce reduction, effective immediately, alongside a company-wide hiring freeze. The email lands in 300 inboxes at once. By lunch, half the floor is in the parking lot on the phone with someone, trying to figure out what happens next. For most people in that room, this is the collapse of the entire plan. Rent is due regardless of whether the paycheck is. The panic isn't really about the layoff. It's about the fact that the layoff exposes how little room there ever was. You feel the same jolt everyone else feels. You're not immune to it. But you also know something they don't. Your rent isn't dependent on this job. Your mortgage isn't dependent on this job. This job funds extra, not survival, because months ago you built a buffer nobody congratulated you for. Chad is one of the 15%. You watch him carry a small box out of the building, and for a second you feel the ordinary discomfort of watching someone else's bad day. Then you go back to your desk, because you weren't cut, and Monday still exists either way. That night, you run the actual numbers instead of guessing at them. 3 properties. Combined net cash flow after every rental expense, roughly $1,100 a month. Not enough to quit tomorrow. Enough to know that if you were cut next, the floor wouldn't disappear from under you. It would just get a little uncomfortable for a while, not catastrophic. That's the moment the math stops being a spreadsheet and starts being a choice. You don't have to take the first desperate offer that comes along if this job ends. You don't have to say yes to a worse job out of panic, the way 3 of your former colleagues do in the following weeks, taking pay cuts just to stop the bleeding. You have the thing Chad didn't have: time to decide. In the weeks after the layoffs, the office changes in small, uncomfortable ways. The people who survive the cut go quiet, heads down, visibly grateful and visibly nervous at the same time. You go quiet too, but for a different reason. You're not scared of the next round. You're just watching, calmly, from a position most of the room doesn't know you have. 2 years later, you run the numbers again. 5 properties now. Net cash flow, just over $4,000 a month after every expense, every vacancy set aside, every repair budgeted for. Your salary hasn't dramatically changed. Your job title hasn't changed. But for the first time, the system is generating more in a slow, unglamorous month than your job is paying you for 40 hours a week of active effort. You don't quit that week. You don't quit the week after either. There's no dramatic resignation letter, no viral moment. The math simply sits there, quietly true, whether you act on it immediately or not. That, more than the number itself, is what actually feels like freedom. Not the ability to leave tomorrow, but the fact that leaving is now a decision instead of an emergency. That's the tipping point nobody warns you about. It doesn't arrive as a fireworks moment. It arrives on a random Sunday evening while you're doing dishes, when you glance at a number in an app and realize the architecture is now doing more work than you are. You go back to the same coffee shop the next morning. Same order, same barista who still doesn't know anything. You drive the same road to the same job, because you haven't quit. Not yet, and maybe not for a while. Nothing about the outside of your life looks any different than it did the week you first ran the math at your kitchen table. But somewhere in that ordinary week, you watch Chad's replacement, a younger version of Chad, doing the exact same thing, chasing the exact same visible scoreboard, and you notice something you couldn't have named when you started. The performance of financial success and the actual architecture of it are almost never found in the same person at the same time. The loud version is usually still exposed to the next Thursday email. The quiet version already built a floor under itself, one boring transfer at a time. You didn't do anything extraordinary. You did one ordinary thing, repeatedly, for longer than most people are willing to. You automated a percentage. You bought one unremarkable property, then another. You let yourself be underestimated while the underneath layer kept building. There was no single dramatic decision, just 100 small, boring ones, made consistently, on days nobody was watching. That's the part this video can't fully show you, no matter how it's cut together. It wasn't one moment. It was every ordinary Tuesday that led up to it. The knowing doesn't make the daily grind easier. You still show up to the same desk. You still answer the same emails. But it does make you wonder, standing in that same cleaning aisle, comparing the same 2 bottles of soap. What are you actually building, and for whom? Building, and for whom?